But instead, I really want to focus on this. I'll just go back a little bit. I really want to focus on this aspect of gaining informed consent, because we feel that it's absolutely critical that patients understand that when they come into the NHS as part of their treatment, we can have the opportunity to gain their consent for use of this tissue, and in a way in which it's the usual way, just as you said earlier, Vivian. That impacts in the NHS. The NHS plays a key role because the NHS have the patients who are within the healthcare environment. They are going to have a surgical procedure to remove material for therapeutic or diagnostic procedure. And that is also important to stop and pause about transfer of tissue for researchers outside of the confines of the NHS and building biorepositories as standalone features. When we're gaining consent at that stage, we're also doing another thing, and that is preserving our pathology archival material, which probably is the largest biorepository in the UK at the moment, and we must preserve that as well. The NHS also has very important information that can be associated with the tissue, patient demographics, and also the pathology and staging of the disease, and also the particular type of treatment that the patient has had, and also outcome data, our cancer registries. And this is information that is already in the NHS. It's not gathering new information, we already do it, and we're told we actually do it extremely very well. And if we can associate that information, which the tissue that we collect, we have increased, as Brian Clark had termed the phrase, increased the utility of that material. All of this brings challenges to the NHS because they are guardians of the tissue and that data. And they have the responsibility, the health board has the responsibility to ensure that the governance structure is in place to manage that resource. And the policies and the systems and protocols support that. Within Glasgow, we are the largest health board in Scotland, and we provide the health care for more than a third of the population in Scotland. So building a bioresource in Scotland, well, this is really the place that you want to do it. But trying to implement systems within an organisation that size can be an enormous challenge. What should be recorded? So the first part is, the first fundamental was when we were designing our systems, how do we inform our patients within the Greater Glasgow Health Board area? Well, we have developed one standard information sheet that covers the whole area, and that describes what tissue is, a role of a pathologist, that no additional material shall be taken, the access to other information, the type of description of the type of research that might take place, who will have access to that, and that will include academic researchers, those in charities, and those also in the commercial sector. And that the research end users, the patients will not be identifiable to the research end users, and importantly, they're able to withdraw their consent, and also they have, if they say no, that it's not going to affect their treatment. Also within the health board, we have other responsibilities to ensure that the information that we provide to our patients complies with our equality and diversity standards to ensure that we're being fully inclusive. We also have to work with our medical record staff to ensure that that information sheet accompanies every single invitation to the hospital for their admission. That's quite a large content, which we had to include in an A4 sheet, double-sided, so that it would fit into our folding machines and then go into the particular size of envelope, because there's obviously issues associated with costage of posting information out to patients now is something that the NHS has to consider. We then looked at making the system more efficient. And coincidentally, this was at the same time when the Human Tissue Authority started to provide some guidance, who had indicated that it was acceptable to record the patient's wishes on the consent to anaesthesia form. So we charged our surgeons with the job, and we were also very fortunate at that time that the whole of the Greater Glasgow and Health Board area were redesigning all of their consent to anaesthesia forms. There was going to be one that covered the whole area. We thought, fantastic, we'll just include that at the bottom of the form where the question is also asked with the permission to take photographs, etc. We did an audit this year, and we were astounded and rather upset to learn that in the whole of Greater Glasgow and Clyde, that only 5% of our patients had been actually given the opportunity. The box was empty. It wasn't that they said no, it's just that the question had never actually been asked. Another issue associated with that system is that the information, the patient recording is on a patient, is really sits within the patient's notes. The other question is, well, where should you ask a patient? And most of our work until now has really been done within the ward. And in that ward environment, it's extremely frantic. The patient is just, lots of demands on the patients for x-rays, additional scans, blood tests, the anaesthetist, the surgeon. And obviously the main focus on that day is really the proposed surgery, discussing risk, post-surgical care. And we believe that that was probably the main answer why there wasn't the opportunity, or patients weren't given the opportunity of asking the question about surplus tissue. And the fourth question is, what should be recorded? Well, the standalone consent form is really something which is really with a nurse-led system and of limited use. And also, I've also alluded to the fact that in the consent to anaesthesia form, it means that the patient's wishes are locked in the patient's case notes and can't transfer to the end users who are handling the specimens, and that is the pathology service with regards to if they can take tissue for research or not. Because of our system, after our audit was really very upsetting, we are going through a system redesign, and we are using IT, which doesn't really come to a surprise. What we're doing is that we have built a standalone screen to record patients' wishes, and that will be recorded when they first engage with hospital staff, and that could be medical record staff at admissions or at the pre-surgical assessment clinics. So patients will have received the information sheet with their admission letter to come along, the date that they come along, and the screen will be there for the end users, which would be the medical record staff or the nurses who lead the pre-surgical assessment clinics. And they will be asked the question, did you receive your information booklet, yes or no? If no, no more the questions are asked. If the question is yes, then they're asked, are you happy that surplus tissue is used for research purposes? And if they say yes, the box is ticked. Because we do believe from our own anecdotal evidence and evidence from others that patients want this to happen, and they're surprised to learn that it's not actually being used for research purposes. Also on that screen, it's important to note that that is where that we could record any withdrawal of consent. And there is also a time for the patients to ask further questions if need be. The use of IT in this system means that the information is held electronically. It's not locked in case notes. It means that for us within the biorepository, and importantly in our pathology, for our pathology archive, that we know that we can use that material for research purposes. We understand that the challenge still arises, and it's important that we continue to raise awareness of the importance of giving tissue and gifting tissue for medical research. So we're in the process of redesigning or publishing patient information posters, and we can't take credit for these. These posters were the work of Encore. Brian Clark is in the room today, and we will be slightly rejigging them and putting in our NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde logo. These will be put in patient downtime areas. We've discussed potentially putting them in GP surgeries. We're also very fortunate that in our new ambulatory care hospitals we have information officers who will be able to hold all of this additional information for our patients. The system which I've just described, we're about to pilot, and we're starting in January 2010, and we're starting this process in all of the pre-surgical assessment clinics in one of our main acute hospitals in Glasgow. And from this, we will monitor the response from our patients. We'll also want to monitor and audit the request for further information, because we've designed an information booklet which we happen to think is really quite good, because we've spent quite a bit of time actually developing it. But actually, if patients need to ask any questions, then that's really probably, you would find out whether it's actually doing the job it's supposed to do. We want to measure the impact on appointments, the clinical appointment time, and that's the time in the surgical pre-assessment, which is nurse-led. That clinic is actually still a very busy clinic, and when we've been in discussions with those staff about this additional step, obviously there's an initial reluctance, because we firmly believe that for most patients it will be, yes, absolutely, I have no questions, it will be fairly straightforward. But we want to ensure and reassure them that and measure if there is, what the impact on the appointment time is. And obviously, also important, we want to measure the withdrawal of consent. We don't underestimate the challenge that we still face, and I think it's important, I think, to mention in the discussion is that the NHS have R&D activity as well, and we take it very seriously. I think that if you to ask any healthcare professional whether or not bringing about improvements to diagnosis, better and safer drugs was not one of their core values, it wouldn't happen. It's something that is inherent. However, within the NHS, it's potentially not an immediate priority because they're dealing with the clinical coalface, waiting list initiatives, etc., etc. Also, within the surgical pre-assessment clinical areas, we know that there's the activity that goes on there is increasing. Our patients will have our surgical patients all undergo MRSA screening prior to surgery. They're also given notification about the population screening of CJD. So we're very anxious that we're not about to go in for patient information overload. I hope I've given you some insight to the focus that we've had on the ensuring that we get the patient consent absolutely right. We feel that this is the cornerstone of ensuring that the availability of tissue for the research community continues, because we need to inform our patients to ensure that we get informed consent so that we can maximise this resource. Thank you very much.